Welcome back to Feed the Post. It has been a long time since I've done one of these. I think December might have been the last, but we are now in the kind of the midst of the transfer portal. The season's done. I want to get back to this, whether it be once a week, once every other week, going through some of the transfer breakdowns and just Big Ten news in general until we do get to the season because college basketball is more and more becoming a 365 day a year type events. And with the transfer portal, and then there's freshmen and all that, AAU is going to come into play at some point. Just figured I come on here maybe once, twice, once a week, once every other week, talk for a little bit about just kind of what's going on. So, seeing that this is the first one since the actual season ended for me, or for college basketball, first time for me being able to kind of talk about this, I figured I would do a little bit of a season recap. It's been a crazy month and a half, being able to kind of follow Purdue throughout their journey, go actually cover the Final Four in person, which was awesome to do. But in the midst of that, I wasn't really able to actually give my thoughts on some of the seasons. So we'll start there. Won't spend too much time, spend more time on kind of the transfer portal update and then a little bit of the Big Ten team schedule. But obviously, we got to start with Purdue, national runner up. And although there's disappointment in that they weren't able to actually win the championship, I mean, just being able to get there was insane. The big time win over Tennessee to go to the Final Four, and that was the point where you really saw them actually be able to let out their emotions for the first time. It seemed like up until then it was very much kind of like business like, and that was what they were supposed to do was their thought. Like they were supposed to make the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight, and then they were finally able to celebrate a little bit, and that was awesome to see. Getting a win there was cool, and then you just kind of run into a juggernaut that is UConn. And UConn, when we look back, probably will go down as one of the better teams we've seen in a long time. So there's no shame in losing to them, but also obviously it is a disappointment just giving what this team has done and come back from. Illinois gets the Elite Eight run. They make the second weekend for the first time in since 2005, I believe. Pick up the win too. They're also a team that they ran into UConn. Giving up a 30-0 run, you're not gonna win that game. But still, I would say a successful season for them, being able to make the Elite Eight and get that far. Then we got a couple teams that made the round of 32 in Northwestern and Michigan State. Northwestern, that's definitely a successful season for them, being able to once again make the tourney. I know I had doubts about them coming into the season. I didn't think that they'd make the tourney. Boo Booey once again just kind of proves me wrong, and Northwestern should start building the statue now as we speak. Michigan State also round of 32. Given where they ended up, you aren't disappointed with the results, but given preseason expectations, you are very much disappointed with that. Obviously, they were top 5 coming into the season. I haven't done too much into them right now in the offseason. We'll talk about them in a bit. I know they added Frankie Fedler. Nebraska, Wisconsin, they both make round 64. Nebraska, that's great that they were able to make it back. And unfortunate that Texas A&M just kind of shot lights out that day against them. But being able to take that step for Fred Hoiberg, for Nebraska as a program, get to the tourney was a big deal. Wisconsin, on the other hand, is like they were 5 seed, they lose to the 12 seed. Just such an up and down year. At one point, they were ranked number 6, and I'm not a AP poll guy at all, but still at some point, like they were ranked number 6 when they played Purdue, I believe, for the first time. And then to fall basically to the point where it was just like they don't look like a good team. Then they go on the Big Ten tourney run. But I think the round of 64 loss is probably closer to what they truly were for the whole season. Also, I mean, there was the whole AJ Storr stuff with kind of what has been going on with the transfer portal and things like that. Those were the teams that made the tourney: Purdue, Illinois, Northwestern, Michigan State, Nebraska, and Wisconsin. We got a couple of people in here, JPs. Appreciate you. JP and Midwest Toker. Appreciate you guys tuning in. A couple NIT teams for Iowa, Ohio State, and Minnesota. IU did pass on that. Whatever your take is on that, I think you should play the games, especially if you have a bit of a younger team, but I understand why they passed. Iowa and Minnesota both got knocked out in the second round of the Big Ten tourney. Iowa was a team I was very low on, and so their second round exit in the NIT has honestly outperformed what I expected for them last year. It's one of those that they're just at that point where you kind of expect to make the tournament if you're coming into a season, but a lot of new players and some freshmen and things like that. Obviously, Owen Freeman winning Big Ten Freshman of the Year was big, kind of be able to build on. Then Ohio State makes the Elite Eight of the NIT, and there's obviously so much to go into with Holtman firing. Diebler comes in, and they look like a brand new team, and they start going on this run, and they're probably 2 wins away in the regular season / Big Ten tourney to make a legitimate like case to make the actual tournament. But they go on the NIT run for a bit. And then you got Penn State, Maryland, Rutgers, Michigan all miss. Penn State is the only one out of those that you would say overperformed. I coming in, I know that was one thing I was very confident in. I was very confident Penn State was going to get to this like 8 Big Ten wins somehow. I think they got to 9. I'll double check really quick. I believe that Penn State, they got to 9. I was just coming in. They just had the vibe of a team that I didn't know how, but they were just going to get to 7, 8 wins. They get to 9. I would say that's a successful first season for Mike Rhoades. Now, we'll see what happens as they run it back, and I'll have obviously team previews and all of that coming out just throughout the offseason, throughout the summer. Not for a little while because there's going to be like 138 newcomers to the Big Ten, and watching film on all of them takes some time. So, but Maryland, Rutgers, Michigan, obviously Maryland and Michigan are probably at the top of that of just like disappointment. Rutgers, it was very much up in the air. I didn't think that they'd be that good. They kind of fell where I thought they would. Now, I'm going to include these teams in here because the Big Ten now has 18 teams. There's UCLA, USC, Washington, and Oregon added. Just got to get used to it. All 4 of them are going to be added. I'm going to be talking about them all summer, all season, because they are now part of the Big Ten. In terms of adding depth and quality from last year, there isn't much. Oregon was the only team to make any sort of tournament, and they did make the NCAA tournament, making the second round. They went 24-12, went on a huge run to win the Pac-12 tournament. That was probably the reason they got in. Then they do pick up a game in the Big Ten tournament. They're a team that's going to have a lot of roster spots to refill, and they have done that. Let's see, they're at or not a lot. They returned 7, but a lot of their main pieces are going to be gone. I know N'Faly Dante is trying to do the medical redshirt plus COVID year in the same year. I assume that won't work because it hasn't for like Marcus Domask and others, but they will try to do that. UCLA 16-17, USC 15-18, Washington 17-15. Washington fires their coach, and so they bring in Danny Sprinkle now. Danny Sprinkle did a good job at Utah State, got the 8 seed, picked up a win in the NCAA tournaments, and then ran into Purdue in which was a game that was just like it was one of those spots that anybody outside of probably UConn, like they were just losing that game, and even UConn probably loses that day to Purdue. But successful season for Danny Sprinkle over at Utah State. He now brings that to Washington, and he's had to do a lot of just kind of retooling. They only bring back 3 players by my counts as I kind of pull that up here. So yeah, that's what Washington is 3rd. There's only 2 teams that return fewer, and that's Illinois, who only returns 2 players, and USC, who only returns 1. So that's kind of the Big Ten season. It was a very weird Big Ten season, I would say. There wasn't a ton of top-level depth at the top, I should say. You had Purdue, clear-cut top 2, 3 teams throughout the entire season. Illinois was more consistent in that top 15-ish range. And then, like I said, Wisconsin was very much up and down. Michigan State was very highly ranked to start, and then they dropped. Nebraska, it's kind of creeping in. Northwestern was creeping in, but there was just a lot of teams in the middle once again, and that's been 2 straight years. Now with 18 teams in the Big Ten, we'll see what exactly happens with that. Is it going to be a wider array? Can we get some more elite teams at the top? Because that's just as a Big Ten fan and covering the Big Ten, that's what's best for the Big Ten. You need, especially if you have 18 teams like they're going to have for however long that the deals are going to be through, and then who knows, maybe it goes to like 35 or something. But like you need 4 or 5 like elite teams, and elite doesn't mean top 10, but elite top 15, top 20. Like you need a heavy presence towards the top because you have so many teams. And if you don't, now you're going to just see there's more and more bad teams. That does also affect the top teams as well. Like I said, I haven't done too much into next year's rosters. A lot of my focus right now, all of my focus is on just watching these transfers coming in, watching these freshmen coming in. For anybody that doesn't know, you can follow me on Twitter at Joe Jackson CBB, and I have a ton of film threads out. I will have one on all. It's projected to be 138 newcomers. I will have a film thread out on all 138. The goal is by July 10th. Give me an extra day or two potentially on there, just if life happens. So that's the goal there. We'll also have like full YouTube length videos breaking down all these transfer and freshman classes per team, and then also just previewing each team kind of later in the summer. Also working on just some more. I want to incorporate some more like fun videos. It's kind of my goal this summer. I'm saying fun is more just like video essay type. Like the sneak peek right now is I'm working on one on the evolution of Zach Edey throughout college, and not just like the stardom, but like what did he actually do on the court better throughout every year to get to become the two-time National Player of the Year. The goal for that is to come out next Thursday. So that's kind of where I'm at in terms of there's the Big Ten season, a little bit of the news update of what I'm doing. And so we can move on to the transfer portal update. And so we just had the deadline happen. No more players can now enter the transfer portal, or I think that technically they could, but they would have to then sit a year. As I believe that's how that would work. But regardless, nobody's going to enter from now on. There may be one or two names or a couple names that can trickle in probably over the next day or two. I would assume by tomorrow night at the latest. I would assume everything should probably be in by then. Monday at the absolute latest. And there's a lot of interesting stuff going on with it, right? You got Purdue that's won over. You got a couple teams that still have a lot of roster spots to fill out, but we know who is returning for the most part. There's a couple of COVID year seniors that we assume will, but I guess haven't heard specifically. I guess I'm just going to kind of run through team by team what's happened for them so far and just where they're at right now. And we'll do that alphabetically. We'll start with Illinois, and they're at 4 roster spots right now open. They only have 2 returnees, so they are a team that lost a ton this off season. You have graduation / draft. You have Domask, Harmon, Guerrier, Shannon, Hawkins. I mean, that's what 4 of your top 6, 7 players right there that aren't coming back in terms of just graduation and drafts. And then on the transfer side, you have Danger, Harris, Hansberry, Goody, and Moretti. They did lose their assistant, I think Chester Frazier. I'll double check that right now, but they did lose him, and I think that's why you see a couple guys like Harris and Hansberry leave. Now there's also Moretti. I think he would fall into that too. Danger was Chester Frazier was the one. He left for West Virginia. Moretti is one that probably falls into that. Danger was the surprise. He commits to Memphis, but that's 10 guys right there. That is 10 dudes right there that Illinois loses. The only 2 that they bring back, Ty Rogers and Dre Gibbs Lawhorn, who both, Ty Rogers was kind of their 5th man in terms of the starting lineup. Dre Gibbs Lawhorn was a freshman, but did have some sparks off. Ryan says, I thought Boswell would be the starting point guard and Rogers at power forward, but then they got Hummerkaus. That's the other thing. I got to look up all these pronunciations because I do not want to pronounce. I definitely mispronounced names last year for like my videos. Do not want that to happen this year. So Hummerkaus, I believe, is how that is pronounced. But yeah, in terms of starting, they're Hummerkaus, not Hummerkaus. In terms of starting, I mean, like I said, they have 4 roster spots open right now, and so yes, we can speculate on kind of what we think could happen. I assume Hummerkaus is going to have to start. He is too good of a shooter, probably not to. He's I don't know if he's necessarily an upgrade over Luke Goody because Luke Goody was also very good, but he provides a little bit different in terms of he can handle the ball a little bit more. He has a little bit better movement shooting. Also just shot the ball really well. So he probably has to start. I have not dug into Trey White or Jake Davis yet, or either of the freshmen. I know Merez Johnson was a pretty high recruit, and I've heard a lot of good things about him. He's kind of in that power forward type spot. Jason Jaxtis is, I believe, just a center. He's more of a pure big. Merez could play center too. If you do, I mean, you could run. If you get another shooter in alongside Boswell, you could maybe run like a Boswell, some sort of shooter, whether that be Dre Gibbs Lawhorn, somebody out of the transfer portal, or Trey White or Jake Davis if they're already there. You can run those two as the backcourt. Ty Rodgers is like the three, quote unquote, but it doesn't really matter because he can kind of facilitate stuff. Then you pair him with Ben Humerkaus, and then whoever you have at center. They have 4 spots open. I expect them to go get at least one, if not 2 bigs, would probably be my guess. Some sort of other guard, and that's probably 1 or 2 bigs, another guard, like pure guard, and then maybe a wing. Kind of makes sense. I wouldn't be shocked if they get one kind of younger guy too out of that, just as more of a developmental piece. But yeah, Ben, Underwood still has his work to do. Moving to IU, and they've had one of the busier off seasons. They are currently at 2 open roster spots. They have 6 returnees, 1 freshman, and 4 transfers in, so 5 total newcomers. And they've just kind of hit on the transfer so far. They bring in Oumar Ballo, obviously, who's one of the best names in the transfer portal, period. The big time. He's a big from Arizona. Luke Goody, I already kind of mentioned, he transfers from Illinois. And so you get in some shooting, and then you get 2 dynamic guards in Miles Rice and Cannon Carlisle. I have not watched Rice. I have watched Carlisle. I think he'll be a good 2 guard, assuming Rice can take kind of the primary guard spot. And I also buy Carlisle's shot because that'll be the other thing is who shoots for this. You do with the Ballo pairing, you do run Mbako, Renew, and then another big again, this time Ballo. We'll see exactly what happens there, but they get talent. They also get Bryson Tucker out of that. Ja'Kai Newton will be a redshirt freshman. He will come back too. I'm excited to see him. Hopefully he can stay healthy. So a pretty busy offseason. They still do have 2 roster spots open. I'm trying. I don't know what they would try to go for. Maybe probably another just kind of wing type, like a pure wing. And then they have to get another big. They have to probably get another true big, and that's probably where I would think that they go for those last 2 spots. Iowa returns a lot. They return tied for most out of all Big Ten. They return 8 people, have 2 roster spots open, 2 freshmen, and then 1 transfer in, which I just found out about today, but it happened like 2 weeks ago. That was one that just, for whatever reason, slipped through the cracks of verbal commits. So not a super busy offseason for them right now. They bring in Drew Thelwell from Morehead State, kind of their point guard. And so I would, he'll probably be their point guard. More than anything right now, everything for them is, what is Payton Sandfort going to do? Is he going to stay in the draft, or is he going to come back? Right now, I have him as coming back, and just for terms of pure housekeeping, so that leaves them the 2 roster spots. They'd obviously have 3 if Sandfort does not come back. So that's going to be the big thing to monitor there, is what exactly happens with Sandfort. And then from there, how can they build up the roster? This is going to be a team that relies, they just need jumps from their sophomores. Owen Freeman, obviously Big Ten Freshman of the Year, but Harding, Dembele, Price Sandfort, going to have to take jumps for them to be good. Lil K says IU has done surprisingly well in the portal. Yeah, I've liked it. Like I said, I haven't watched Miles Rice or Bryson Tucker, but I can see the vision for them, and you get a ton of talent. You get for as bad as they were last year, they were 10-10 in the Big Ten. I know that they beat up on bad teams. They lost to good teams, but they did that, and now they have both of these guards that they have are going to be better than what they had last year. So promising stuff there for IU. Next up is Maryland. They have 1 open roster spot, 6 returnees, 2 freshmen, 4 transfers in. Now, just the way that the transfers fell, they got a lot of their transfers very early. And so at that point, I was still covering Purdue in the Final Four, and I just have not really watched Maryland much, like any of theirs. I think I might have watched Selton Miguel, if I'm recalling right. But regardless, I have either watched one or none. I've watched none. I've watched none of them yet. So in terms of talking about that, that'll be something I'll do throughout the summer. But they get Derek Queen, who's a very big time recruit. They return Julian Reese. They return Jordan Geronimo. I know Rodney Rice and Jacoby Gillespie, are 2 big time or bigger time guard names. So that's just what they needed. They needed some sort of guard. They get that. You're hoping for a jump from Deshaun Harris-Smith. In terms of shooting, they do get Chance Stevens back, my assumption. He had an injury last season that took him out for the entire year. And so he was like a 45% shooter at, I believe, Loyola Marymount. If not, it was Pepperdine. It was one of those 2. So he brings in some shooting. I have to, like I said, I have to watch the guards. Something I'll have to get back to later in the off season. Michigan, one open roster spot, only three returnees. Obviously, Dusty May, the new coach, brings in a lot of transfers. Four transfers, two freshmen, or no, six transfers, three freshmen. Sorry, and then three returnees with one open roster spot. I watched a few of their transfers. Danny Wolf is fun, 7-footer that can legitimately put the ball on the ground, creates like a guard at times. I don't like the pairing next to Vladislav Golden, another transfer that they got in. He follows from FAU. Like, if their plan is to play a bunch of minutes of them together, I don't love it, especially defensively. Offensively, I think it can still work, but defensively, I don't know what exactly happens. They get Burnett back, which is big. I'm working under the assumption Jace Howard is back, but I have not heard anything one way or the other. So lots of new faces there. Like I said, 6 transfers, 3 freshmen. Still have to watch a lot of them, but Dusty May is at the point where it seems like the team should be respectable. Do they make the tourney? I have no clue, but year one, just getting Michigan back to respectable is the goal. So Craig Bowers says new house looks nice. So yeah, I did move in the past couple of weeks. I actually have like a full little bedroom as an office space instead of just this little nook. I have a window, which I did not have a window for a year, and I didn't realize how much I miss like just having sunlight come in on my desk until I got this. So yes, appreciate that, Craig. Moving on, Michigan State. They've had a pretty quiet offseason, one open roster spot. They have 8 returnees, 3 incoming freshmen, and 1 transfers, which is Frankie Fiddler. Fiddler is a big-time scorer, 20 points per game at Nebraska Omaha. He's this guy that can kind of work from the mid-range, can shoot the ball some. And so he's that high-level scorer that I think they needed to add. They have 1 open roster spot. They need a big, just like they still need a big. They lose to Soko. Right now, the big room is Cooper, Kohler, and Booker. And then Jesse McCulloch is an incoming freshman. I know Kurt Tang and Jace Richardson, they are also pretty highly touted incoming for Kurt. I think they're both like top 40, top 50 incoming recruits. So got to watch them still. Frankie Fiddler, I like the fit, especially offensively. He can run pick and roll. He can run in transition, can kind of create a little bit off the dribble. He's not like, he's not like Tyson Walker in terms of just you're going to throw him the ball every single time and go create, but he can score. Him pairing with Akins, and then you got Holloman. You're hoping Jeremy Fears. Everything's all good there, and he's able to play a big role too. So I don't hate it there. They still have 1 spot, and if they can get some sort of big, I know pickings are becoming a little bit slimmer. That would be big. Minnesota, 3 open roster spots now, 4 returnees, 2 freshmen, 4 transfers in. Obviously, they made news, or I don't know, but sort of in the headlines because Elijah Hawkins just straight up got poached. Elijah Hawkins said he was back. A week later, he goes and I believe just transferred to Texas Tech. I don't blame Elijah Hawkins at all. Like, I assume he's going to get a ton more money, and if that's the case, you go and do it. Honestly, I'm very, very, very much pro NIL. I'm even cool with the transfer portal. Yes, it changes college, but I'm cool with it. There still needs to be some sort of regulation like that. I don't know what the answer is, but it happens. The other one that just got announced is Cam Christie. I don't know if, and maybe I'll be wrong, I don't think Cam Christie is poached as much as just probably keeping his options open, because unless I missed something, and if I did, somebody correct me, but I didn't see anything from him specifically of I'm transferring. It was more of a hey, I'm just putting my name in the portal, and that was just more from verbal commits and stuff like that. I don't know if Christie's in college next year. I think there's a legit chance he stays in the NBA. I think that's a big reason why he has the do not contact tag. And so we'll see what happens there. But they lose a ton too. Joshua Olajoseph, Pharrell Payne, Braden Carrington, Isaiah Innen, Elijah Hawkins, Cam Christie, Christopos Canis, who's an overseas kid. I like some of the upside he had as a wing, but he also transfers. They bring in a couple guys. Brendan Rigsby. Brendan Rigsby is going to be my guy. I don't think he'll be talked about much, but when I watched this film, it was just consistent. I was like, he's just making good plays. He's doing this right. He plays some defense. He's undersized at 6'3" from a pure wing that he probably wants to play. But I really like him. Caleb Williams is a D3 transfer. I don't see it, but I also didn't really see it with Elijah Hawkins last year. It's not a one-to-one, but maybe, Ben Johnson might just, if Caleb Williams works out, I will just kind of pivot to trusting Ben Johnson more in evaluating point guards in terms of in smaller guards. Then that's just how it is. Then it's Femi Odukale. Another pronunciation I have it written down, but I need to double check. But he just transferred as well to Minnesota, and he's interesting. He transfers. It's Femi Odukale, and he just transfers from New Mexico State. It's kind of this like pseudo, almost point forward type. We'll see. I think if he's used as more of a defensive guy, attack off the dribble, I could see that working out. They still have 3 roster spots, and they need talent. You need somebody to pair around Darcy Garcia and Mike Mitchell. I would like to see another somewhat high-level guard, and then they need wings. They need wings of some capacity, unless they're going to play 3 bigs. Nebraska, 2 open roster spots. Rienk Mast did just announce, I just saw, he's going to take a medical red shirt this upcoming season. He, I guess, last year just did not have a healthy knee at all. Or not healthy knee at all, but like it was not a completely healthy knee for the whole season. Talked with doctors, and they said that he's going to medical red shirt surgery. So that's a tough blow for them. But they have 2 open roster spots, 4 returnees, 2 freshmen, 5 transfers in, and they have a lot of seniors once again. They get back Juwan Gary, Bryce Williams. They bring in Braxton Mayo, who's a 7'1" big and provides legitimate rim protection. 2 of their other transfers, Connor Sejan, Gavin Griffiths, familiar names in the Big Ten, provide that kind of movement shooting potential. So they probably, like, looking through, I don't know what's going on with Aaron Eulis, if he'll be back. I would assume he probably will be, but they probably do want another kind of true point guard or kind of lead guard like that. But if Rienk Mast was healthy, you obviously feel much, much better about this team in general. But I think Hoiberg's still at the opportunity, especially with 2 roster spots left, to put Nebraska at the chance of having another successful season. Northwestern, 1 open roster spot. They return a lot too. Return 8 players, 2 freshmen, 2 transfers in. I've watched Jalen Leach, and I mean, there's such big shoes to fill with Boo Buie. Jalen Leach will sort of have to do some of that. I think Northwestern, they have 1 roster spot. They need a point guard. Like, they need a true point guard. Because then if the lineup's looking more like true point guard, Jalen Leach, Ty Berry, Brooks Barnhizer, Nicholson, with Martinelli kind of coming off the bench, you're hoping for – I'm still high on Justin Mullins. I know last year was more of a transitional year. I'm high on what he can be as like a 3-and-D wing. You hope for a jump from him. And now you're kind of back at that 7-8-man rotation again. And then I could see some sort of success. Right now, I don't think that they'd be a turning team, but – again, Chris Collins just might be a really good coach. And if that is, then, hey, they'll probably make some noise. So Ohio State, 2 open roster spots, 6 returnees, 2 freshmen, and 3 transfers in. They've had an interesting offseason. And so they bring in Michi Johnson, Micah Parrish. Michi Johnson especially, great pairing next to Bruce Thornton in the backcourt. That's going to be a very fun 1-2. It's more about what they've lost. And they lose Scotty Middleton, Roddy Gale, Zed Key, Felix Akpara, Dale Bonner, and Jamison Battle. That is 6 of their top 7 guys last year, 6 of their top 8 guys last year. Probably, I guess, 6 of their top 8 or 9, depending on how you view Devin Royal. But the big one there's Felix Akpara. They bring in Aaron Bradshaw, and I don't know how much it affected or not, but for me, Felix Akpara to Aaron Bradshaw is a downgrade. And so now they're at this spot where, like, unless Austin Parks takes a jump as a sophomore, he didn't play a ton last year. They don't really have many bigs. I know Kalen Etzler's on the roster too. He hasn't played much in his seasons. You got some guards and some wings in Bruce, Micah Parrish, Michi Johnson. Devin Royal, I know, has some promise. I'm still high on Taysom Chapman, but also, I don't know. I want to see what they do with these final 2 spots. I don't love the roster construction right now, just in general. I don't know if it all fits together great, but they do have 2 open roster spots. We'll see what happens there. Oregon, first Pac-4 team. I'm just going to call them Pac-4s. In Oregon, UCLA, USC, and Washington. First Pac-4 team we'll talk about. 2 open roster spots, 7 returnees, 1 freshman, and 3 transfers in. This is a team that I haven't watched any of their newcomers. I've watched them a little bit in the tournament, obviously, in their runs, but they don't return Kiesnard and they don't return Dante. Um, I don't have a ton to say on them, truthfully, right now. I know Traore. I kind of like Traore for their incoming freshman. A little bit I've seen. They got dudes. I just have to go back and watch, and that's as simple as that for them right now. Penn State, they are the first team that we've talked about now who has a completely full roster. All 13 scholarships have been used. They get back Ace Baldwin, they get back Puff Johnson, Nick Kern, Zach Hicks, and DeMarco Dunn. That is a core of 5 seniors and fifth years who played a ton of minutes for them last year. Unfortunately for them, that is the only 5 people that they do return. Everybody else is new. They have 4 incoming freshmen. None super highly ranked from my understanding, but we'll see what happens there. I really like the Eli Rice pickup, sophomore transfer from Nebraska. He's this like 6'7" wing. He played point guard in high school. I don't think he's a point guard in college, but like I've liked the physicality. His jumper needs to improve, but kind of this defensive guy, I think that can create a little bit off the bounce. I could see him developing. I haven't watched Yannick Niederhauser or Keki Neze. I've watched Freddie Dilion. He's a redshirt sophomore transfer from Tennessee. We just haven't seen much of him. From what I've seen, I went back and watched some of his film at Tennessee, and then also some of his high school film. He's just kind of this higher level, create off the dribble type dude. Wasn't super efficient in his limited minutes. Needs to go down on the turnovers, but I see the upside in terms of defense and this on-ball creator. This was a dude that, like, coming into last season, he was on some mock drafts. The talent's there. Hopefully he's in the right fit for both Penn State and for him. Then next is the one Purdue, the one team that is actually oversigned right now. They are at -1 roster spots. I know that's been publicly talked about a decent bit. 7 returnees, 8 returnees and 6 freshmen, right? Yes, 8 returnees, 6 freshmen. Nobody as of right now has entered the portal that we've seen. And so we'll see what happens. Like, unless a name pops out in the next day or two, we can assume all 8. I assume that either if nobody is going to take a prep year, there's a chance that could happen. If not, I assume it would be one of these freshmen probably just moves to a walk-on, gets NIL money to cover, all is well. Probably would redshirt anyways. And the reason I'm just like, it's something to talk about for Purdue because like there's no transfers for Purdue. You bring back obviously a good chunk of the roster. You lose Zach Edey and Mason Gillis and Lance Jones and Ethan Morton. 3 of those 4, especially big parts of last season. So you have to retool. None bigger than Zach Edey, both physically and figuratively. Right now, my take on Purdue is they're going to be this like top 20-ish team that offensively is insanely fun. I just need to be convinced on the defense. I don't know what they do defensively. I'm very excited to dive into these freshmen, though. Catching's high level. Jakari Harris is one dude I have seen. I'm very excited about him. I've heard very, very good things about CJ Cox. So that's just where they're at right now. They're 1 over. To me, it's a deal, but it isn't at all because realistically, the player that this is going to affect is either somebody that wasn't going to be in the roster that did return, or it's going to be an incoming freshman that probably just would have redshirted anyways. So whether they do a prep year or a preferred walk-on, like they probably weren't going to play anyways. And so, yes, they had to get down to 13, but I don't think it's as big of a deal to me just because it's like realistically that player probably isn't affecting next year's squad in general. A few more teams to get through, and then we'll talk a little bit about the Big Ten schedule. Rutgers. 2 open roster spots for Rutgers, 3 returnees, 5 freshmen, 3 transfers in. Obviously, the talk with them, right, is they bring in Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey, 2 of the top 3 recruits in the class, only behind Cooper Flagg, who is generational. Potentially generational as a prospect, I should say. They only bring back Jamichael Davis and Manuel Ogbole, and Jeremiah Williams. They get in a couple transfers in Acuff, Martini, and Durkak. I haven't watched Acuff or Martini. I kind of like Durkak. If he's like their 7th, 8th man, is this kind of wing type forward that can run point a little bit. I like some of the defense. But it's going to be what can this freshman class do from day one, specifically with Harper and Ace Bailey. But they do add Lathan Somerville, Bryce Dorsch, Dylan Grants. They also have 2 open roster spots. I don't know what they would exactly want to do. My guess is a big. I'm pretty confident that they probably want a big. Lathan Somerville and Emmanuel Ogbole are two of their bigs right now. Like I said, I haven't watched much of Acuff or Martini, so they could also be bigs, and I just don't know. I'm going to try to find that. Acuff is a point guard, so they have that covered, especially with him and Williams. And then Martini is more of like a power forward type. So yeah, definitely go get a big would be my guess. They lose. They lose. I mean, they lose a lot too. They lose to graduation / draft is well, just graduation is Andre Hyatt, Fernandez, Williams, Palmquist, transfers out Antonio Chol, but then Derek Simpson, Wolfolk, Mag, Amori, and Griffiths, none bigger probably than Amori in that sense. So a lot of retooling, but we'll see what happens. The freshman's going to be fun, and we'll see what happens. So 3 of the Pac-4 teams now left. UCLA up first, 0 roster spots remaining. They are completely full. I'm working under the assumption that Dem Bona does not return. And so he's in the NBA draft right now. He could technically still return. I believe he's still up. He would be a junior. And I know he's kind of projected second-ish round. So if he comes back, then UCLA is also 1 over. But 6 returnees, 1 freshman, and 6 transfers in. I watched a little bit of them. This is another team along with all the Pac-4 teams, I have to dive in more and kind of figure out what they are. But I know UCLA didn't have a good year last year, but this is more just looking purely at numbers and stuff. So I like I said, I need to go watch film, which I will. UCLA is going to be a sneaky pick for the top of the Big Ten. Kind of is my thought. Like I like it's. I don't know. They had a bunch of talent, but they had a bunch of talent maybe that hasn't necessarily led to winning. Like Sky Clark, Kobe Johnson's good. They bring back Stefanovic. I like the Dominic Harris transfer. They have Eric Freeney is their only incoming freshman. They bring back a lot of sophomores. I could see them being a team that kind of competes at the top. And another team would be USC, their counterpart in LA. Eric Musselman, new head coach there at USC. He has 1 returnee from the previous roster, 2 freshmen, and then 9 transfers. So 1 open roster spot left. And I believe that is, I forget who is probably going to take that, but they do have somebody, I think, kind of in line that's projected to take that last spot. They have 9 seniors or 5th years on their team. It is going to be a very senior-heavy team. It feels like very much like a Musselman's just going for this year and then figure out development and kind of bringing in freshmen more as you go. Yeah, they bring in a lot of dudes. They're another team that I think could compete at the top. They're going to have some pretty good guard play. I need to watch the freshmen, and there's 9 transfers, so I haven't gotten to all of them. They do have Terrence Williams, transfer from Michigan. I know that's a name that we would know. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what Musselman does there in year 1. The final of the Pac-4 teams that we'll talk about is Washington. They have the most open roster spots left out of any of the 18 Big Ten teams. They have 5 open roster spots, 3 returnees, 2 freshmen, and 3 transfers in. No new coach, Danny Sprinkle, Utah State coach. I kind of already talked about him earlier in the podcast, but he's just got a lot of work to do still. They bring in DJ Davis. DJ Davis, if Washington ends up being solid, DJ Davis will be a sleeper, like all Big Ten first team player for me. I think he could have an insanely big year as this 5th-year high-level scoring guard. He's really the only one I've watched. Wilhelm Bradenbach, I know obviously I'm familiar with from his time at Nebraska. So he's there as well. And then they got a couple freshmen and then some dudes that I still just need to watch. They lose a ton from last year, obviously they were a pretty senior-heavy team last year, and then the transfers. So final Pac-4 team there. And then the final team we'll talk about is the most recent team to completely fill out their roster, and that is Wisconsin. 0 open roster spots. They return 8, 2 freshmen, and 3 transfers in. And so they lose AJ Storr. They lose Connor Essegian. They lose Chucky Hepburn. They lose Tyler Wall. And those are big losses. I don't know if they've added enough to fully overtake it and get back to being good, but I don't know. It's Wisconsin. They'll probably be hovering in that 5, 6, 7 range, probably in the Big Ten somehow. I don't love the roster construction. I think they're going to be reliant on either Cameron Hunter's game translating from Arkansas State, or like John Blackwell taking a big jump. That's kind of where it's at. Xavier Amos, I absolutely love the fit. That's been my favorite fit out of any transfer so far that I've watched, which I think is like 25 that I've done. He is just the perfect stretch four fit, can create a little bit off the bounce. He's more of a straight line driver, not going to be like a Tyler Wall post up and twirl and all that, but can shoot the three well. I like his defense for the most part. I don't think he's a great perimeter defender, but I think he gets by, can defend the rim. Him and Crowell are both going to be able to pick and pop, and I think that can pose some problems for teams. So that's where everybody is at. I didn't expect to deep dive each team when I came into this, but it happens. And so here we are. We'll go through the Big Ten schedule in just a second. But if you are watching, please hit the like button. If you aren't subscribed, also do that. I have some more fun videos in the works coming out on YouTube very, very soon. So appreciate everybody that's tuning in, and this could help with that. If you're listening on audio, we're on Apple, Google, and Spotify. 5-star review would be great. So final section we'll get to today, and that is the Big Ten schedule was announced. So, or not Big Ten schedule, but Big Ten opponents were announced. Now, like I said, this is going to be the first year with 18 Big Ten teams. It is still a 20 game Big Ten roster or Big Ten schedule. So 20 Big Ten games. And like I think most people kind of expected, there's going to be kind of this pod system in terms of incorporating the Pac-12. So the Pac-12 teams, they are going to all play each other twice. Every team is going to play only 3 other teams twice. And maybe later, once I get a little bit more familiar with kind of these teams and these roster constructions, I'll break down a little bit more of like, hey, I think this is maybe a bit easier schedule and stuff like that. I just haven't had the time, nor am I comfortable enough like with how these teams work, being able to say, oh, this team's going to be better than this team and stuff like that. So, but what I did kind of figure out is the pairings. And so from my understanding, the way this is going to work is there's just going to be kind of these region pods, right? And so like UCLA and USC, they're going to be paired together, and they're going to go. So when they go on their road trips, they're going to go to 2 teams, and they'll play the UCLA and USC will play the same 2 teams, right? And then they'll just flip, and that'll be in the same week, and it's vice versa. When there's going to be pairs of 2 teams that probably travel out there. One will play UCLA on like Wednesday or Thursday. One will play USC, and then they'll flip for probably the Saturday, Sunday game. That would be my guess. And so the pairings, UCLA and USC, and then there's Oregon, Washington as kind of that Northwest. So those are 2 there. Now, the way that I think the rest was going to work, and this is just based on how the schedules worked out, who's playing, because each non-Pac-4 team is going to be playing, they're going to be playing, one of the trips will be on the road, and they'll face 2 of the Pac-4 teams at home. So based on kind of that, the pairings I see it as is IU and Purdue is going to be 1. Makes sense, obviously. Illinois Northwestern makes a ton of sense. Maryland Rutgers, Michigan State, Minnesota Wisconsin, and then Ohio State Penn State. Those seem like the 6 pairings where it's very much going to be like they line up in that UCLA and USC is going to play, those 2 teams in 1 week and vice versa. And Washington and Oregon will play these 2 teams in 1 week. And that's how it's just going to work, is these pots, right? The one where it gets a little interesting is Iowa and Nebraska, because Iowa and Nebraska is the last pairing, and it makes sense logistically, right? They're close together. They're also the closest teams to the Pac-12 or the Pac-4 teams. And so my guess is that when the Pac-4 teams play Iowa and Nebraska, that'll be their 1 game weeks, right? Because each team, Big Ten team, generally has 2 weeks of where they only play 1 game. That would be my guess, because Iowa and Nebraska are the only ones that are flipped. And what I mean by that is Iowa and Nebraska, one of them goes on the road to UCLA and USC. The other one goes on the road to Washington and Oregon. Every other pairing that I've said, they play the same teams on the road, whether it be the Washington-Oregon pairing or the UCLA-USC pairing. So my guess would be is when that happens, that'll probably be their 1 game weeks. They're kind of like quote unquote bye weeks, and then they play that, which also means it would be the bye weeks for Iowa and Nebraska. Now, the other option I've kind of seen could happening is a Pac-4 team plays Iowa and Nebraska once, and then they play the other Pac-4, like another Pac-4 team. So, like, say it's UCLA and USC, or UCLA. Well, I think it would make more sense if it's UCLA and like Oregon, right? UCLA maybe plays Iowa at Iowa, and Oregon plays at Nebraska or something like that. Then maybe I could see them also playing later that week. So that's how I'm going to see kind of the pairings working out. So, like I said, IU Purdue. And what I mean by pairing, once again, is that these teams will play the Pac-4 teams in the same week, and then they'll just flip. Whichever team they play first, the other will play later. So the pairings: IU, Purdue, Illinois, Northwestern, Maryland, Rutgers, Michigan, Michigan State, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Ohio State, Penn State, and then Iowa, Nebraska. Iowa, Nebraska one's a bit weird. So that was kind of all I wanted to talk about in terms of Big Ten schedule. Like I said, maybe I'll go through more and deep dive. Like, oh, this seems like a little bit better. But at the end of the day, you're playing what, 3 of the teams twice. So that would mean you're playing 14 teams once. 7 of them will be home, 7 of them will be on the road, and that's just what the new Big Ten looks like. So, yeah, that's kind of where we're at. It feels good to be back, to be doing this. Like I said, I'm hoping the goal is once a week. Realistic goal is once every other week, and what it'll turn more into is like a news update, and then just kind of talking through transfers, incoming freshmen for a while. We'll eventually get to previews. I'll get people that cover each team on for those. So should be a fun time with 18 teams. It is busy. It is very busy in the offseason. I have said it a couple times throughout, but there's projected to be as many as 138 newcomers between freshmen and transfers in the Big Ten. There could be about 95 transfers. There's 43 freshmen right now, so busy times. We had a couple comments about Purdue. Craig said Jacobson may have to play real minutes to defend the rim. It's possible. Like I said, I haven't watched Jacobson, so I'm very much just like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. There's also the hope that like Caleb Furst could kind of resurge and be a guy that can play legit minutes. At Albany says Berg should have a major role, TBH. He's the other one. Like, maybe he takes a jump and he becomes a legitimate threat there. There's also the whole, like, Purdue could just play fun like this year. And I wouldn't be mad if they just didn't care. Not care about defense, but it's just like TK at the 5, and then you have 3 wings and Braden Smith out there, and you just have fun and run. S.A. Wood says, how much of a team leader move would it be for one of Purdue's stars that are getting plenty of NIL to step up and offer their scholarship for the betterment of the team? I mean, it could happen. It's going to be weird. Like, because this can happen now. And so then it's like, what's stopping a team from getting 16 dudes, like legit dudes, and just paying them in NIL to cover their scholarships? And I understand that then it's playing time and stuff, so that's probably one of the limiting factors. But like, I don't know. It's the only worry I have with stuff like that is it kind of just opens up this can of worms throughout college that I don't know if I would love. Of like, why don't like, you almost just like, if you are having guys that are willing to buy in, it's like, especially as like freshmen and sophomores, of like, hey, you're just going to sit this year. We have 17 legit dudes. You're going to sit this year. And so you're not going to have scholarship. We'll pay you an NIL, just almost like a farm system type. That's my one worry if that happens. Also, I know that, I think the Purdue players are going to be taken care of. They're going to be taken care of. I'm not too worried about that. They'll get covered what they need to. So I think that's going to wrap it up for me on this one. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Like I said, if you're on YouTube, please like and subscribe. It just helps me a lot. Also, comment who you think has been having the best offseason so far in terms of transfer portal and adding freshmen. But yeah, if you're listening on audio, please give it a 5 stars. We are on Apple, Google, and Spotify podcasts. And when I say we, it is me for Feed the Post. But yeah, appreciate all the support. You can follow me on Twitter at Joe Jackson CBB for Phil, the transfer and freshman film threads coming out. And then also be on the lookout for full-length YouTube videos coming out soon. Like I've said, the sneak peek is the evolution of Zach Yee, hopefully coming out next week. I'm having a ton of fun going through just the freshman, sophomore, junior year film of that and how he's actually able to progress on the court. But plenty of other stuff too. Going to be a busy offseason. Appreciate everybody tuning in, and I will catch you in the next one.